Hi, folks. Welcome to the last podcast of the year, the 31st podcast videocast. In how many hours? Not many, less than 10 hours. We'll be completely, absolutely and totally out of the EU. So I think we're going to have a chat about what went on with the Holyrood vote yesterday. We broadcast before the debate, or actually during the debate. Idiot Charlie in the corners holding up a newspaper.
I just thought it was pertinent to what you said, about 10 hours.
And then we're going to kind of skip around the place. There's a few good articles up that we're going to discuss, but we're not sure which of them we're going to go with. We'll see where life takes us. So, well, let's kick off with Jimmy.
Oh,
Holyrood.
yeah, it was an interesting wee afternoon's barnstorming in Holyrood. Nicola Sturgeon done a bit of roof slapping. Mike Russell ended with a fabulous speech that begs the question, why has he been so underused by the SNP for the last 5 or 6 years? But we're not allowed to ask questions like that in case people think we're somehow Union plants that are trying to split the Yes movement. So I'll let others go with what they thought. I thought Labour made an ass of themselves. Willie Rennie proved that he is the biggest pussy in Scotland. And all in all, it was quite an entertaining afternoon.
Stuart.
I noticed how, I agree with you, it was a barnstorming speech from Mike Russell. I've got a great deal of respect for Mike Russell, have done for years. And you're right, Jimmy, goodness knows why has he not been used before. And he is standing down, he's not coming back. And I noticed when he got up to speak, it was quite an effort. He had to push himself up out of the chair. His legs weren't enough, and he made a grunt. So I notice these things. Don't ask. But what a speech! And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to repeat the wee story about his. I mean, his wee story about his own father. His own father volunteered in World War II at the age of 19. He was on the beach at Dunkirk, got wounded, and came back and survived the war. However, the point was this. Mike Russell was saying he grew up in a world where he didn't get injured when he was 20 years old. He didn't stand on a foreign beach and wonder what the hell was going to happen to him. And he's now got a son who's 20 years old, and he'll not have to stand on a foreign beach and get wounded and wonder what's going to happen to him. And that he puts down to the European Union.
Good speech.
Yeah, yeah, it's something that was deliberately withheld from people during the entire of the EU debate. The fact that the EU was such a strong advocate of peace and such a strong advocate of bringing peoples together rather than separating them. And that was deliberately kept from the people of the UK by the Conservative Party and the Vote Leave campaign. It's a shame that we didn't shout more about it at the time.
I was speaking to my daughter, my English daughter, about an hour ago, and I was explaining to her, pointing out to her something that they don't talk about in England, exactly what you just said. I said, Europe, over the last few hundred years, has been the most violent, war-making continent in this world. Mm-hmm. And yet, look where it's been since the end of World War II and the establishment, the setting up of the European Union, apart from Yugoslavia, essentially.
It's an interesting thing to look at over the next 10 or 20 years, Stuart. Now that Britain's not a part of the European Union, will Britain be the only part of Europe that joins in foreign wars and exports war to other continents? Because I can't see any real appetite in Germany or France
at this point.
Many more.
At this point, we've got to bring Phil in. This is a definite red rag to a bull. Phil?
Oh, I mean, sorry. They'll go off on foreign wars. When have they not? When have they not? All my family in Southwest Ireland, there's 15 to 20 million Irish people missing. Don't know how many million Scottish people are missing. And if you start looking at Indians, Chinese, Africans, North Americans, the English are just doing what they've always wanted to do, running around, robbing and a shooting and a stabbing. You know, that's what they've always been. They far outweigh, I mean, Spanish are bad, French are bad, but sorry, they're, you know, second rate, you know, they're definitely second rate compared to England. And we do it for their own good, of course. You must remember that.
Yes,
we do it for their own good. Rant over.
Well, I suppose the other interesting thing about the Holyrood vote was, did any of the Labour Party in Holyrood vote other than for rejecting the deal?
It was unanimous. The only people who voted against the deal in Holyrood were the Tories.
It was a funny number I saw. I saw 30 holdouts. Is there 30 Tory MSPs?
I think the Tories have got 29 at the moment, haven't they?
That's what I thought. So I was thinking, who was the other one? Anyway.
I don't know. I meant to check that this morning and didn't, because it was such a clear vote. And
Alex Cole Hamilton. I've just mentioned his name because I noticed in the evening news yesterday, he's predicting that the Holyrood election in May will be postponed until the autumn.
Fabulous.
He's praying he can keep his seat.
I don't think Alex Cole Hamilton has predicted anything ever with any accuracy. So I think you can say with absolute certainty that the May election will take place in May now that he's said it, won't he?
Good man there, Jimmy.
And with a bit of luck, we'll be going cheerio at the next election to make, what's his, Cole Hamilton. Yes.
Oh, you can only hope so. But given how slimy that man is, I'm pretty sure he'll have slithered his way up the list just to make sure that he gets back.
Oh, I freshly dipped in Vaseline every morning. Yeah, you can see him. Oh.
So
the only man I've seen on telly that makes Michael Gove look dry.
The Labour Party position at Westminster compared to the position at Holyrood. Starmer's obviously wasn't listened to at Holyrood. How do we think the effect of Labour supporting the Johnson government is going to impact them?
Well, I think it'll be poor, mate. I think it will be thrown in their face for the next 3 or 4 years. Anything that goes wrong, Brexit related, they're going to have to take their share of the blame. I'm not surprised that Scottish Labour didn't listen to Keir Starmer's I'm assuming they all got emails yesterday, mainly because it's the only way that they can appear to be in any way independent from London, is to do something like that, to not quite vote with how the leadership wants them to go. The only surprise being they have so few members left in Scotland that 90% of their funding must now come from the UK party. So that may have ramifications for Scottish Labour's election campaign come the next year.
I mean, Keir Starmer's coming across at the moment as the most stubborn unionist against any referendum. Apparently, he repeated that yesterday, I believe.
He's trying to out-unionist Boris, which is quite a strange hill to die upon.
He'll be getting fed that from the Scottish Labour Party.
Yeah, well, that's what they're saying.
Who still believe that if they're unionists, they'll somehow get more votes.
Well, this is it. They've worked out that they're not going to win any seats back from the SNP. So the only people who are going to get any seats from at Holyrood is the Tories.
Yeah.
Well, considering if they had voted along with Starmer, that would be sticking the middle finger up to 62% of the Scottish voting population. That would be suicidal, considering the other 38 are probably either loony left wingers that think we can wing it on our own, or right wingers. You know, for a while.
Quite a sad state of affairs for the Labour Party in Scotland to be that far out of touch with the electorate, though. I mean,
does anybody have polling figures on the percentage of Remainers who voted Labour at the last Holyrood elections? Anybody got any idea on that? No.
Oh, how many Labour voted votes for independence?
No, Remain.
Remain.
What percentage of the Labour base is anti-Brexit?
I'd
Well,
have thought it'd be quite high, mate. I'd have thought it'd probably be, given the 62% number in Scotland, I'd have thought Labour voters, you'd be looking in the 70s for the amount of Labour voters that were Remainers.
It's kind of, that's my gut feeling, but I can't remember ever seeing figures. Interesting.
Yeah.
The other, well, the article I think that most surprised me today was the FT article. That I think, was that you, Jimmy, that found that?
Yeah, it surprised me in its tone, and it surprised me that it wasn't quite so badly out of touch with Scotland as most times in FT articles are. You know, it sounded like the person had actually done some research and didn't just automatically jump to the conclusion that Scots and the Scottish people don't actually understand politics, so we've no idea what we're voting for.
I think the only, yes, it's an if you're a unionist with any sense in you, I suppose there must be some in Scotland, you probably think, oh, that's quite a good article. There was only one so-called fact, some assumed fact that I disagreed with, and that was on the economy, where the guy claimed that the economy was the weakness because people in Scotland are used to getting handouts from England. Now, he could be right about the economy being the key issue, but I don't agree that we get handouts from England.
No, and there was also part of the conclusion where he suggested that Scotland could be bought off yet again, that I thought was just ludicrous. I think that's very lazy thinking, to think that somehow English largesse would be seen by the 60% of people who want independence as a reason not to vote for it. I think that conclusion is laughable, but the actual article itself was a wee bit better than most that we get from down there.
But would that even be sustainable? Once Brexit begins to bite, is Boris Johnson or any Tory government leader going to be able to get up and say, right, well, we're giving this shovel load of money to Scotland to keep them in the union? And they have to make that argument that way because Scotland's too poor, blah, blah, blah. We already subsidise them. We're going to subsidise them some more. Will the English electorate stand for that?
No, that's why the reality of the reality of what's going to happen that we've been predicting for the last few years is very different to the conclusion that the guy came to. They have to cut funding across the board. Scotland will be hammered with cuts, and it has to be done in such a way that they don't take most of the blame for it. Hence the nonsense where there was an article this morning where they're decrying Scotland not discussing cross-border infrastructure projects with them. We didn't want them involved in transport. Transport's devolved. We will sort our own transport projects out. Thank you very much.
See, before we move on to that, give Phil a jump in.
It's the expression you use, which I was surprised, and it's giving Scotland shed loads of money, and would they like it? Sorry, you're not giving you sheds loads of money. At best, they'd be returning money that they've pinched off you over the last few hundred years from the 50s and 60s. Where's all the oil money? Where's all this, the way they go on about the whiskey tax? They're not giving you anything, you know. Just
but we're not talking truth here, Phil. We're talking the spin.
Oh, I know, everything's fun, isn't it? Yeah, but I mean, sorry, I mean, dear, I mean, it's just so frustrating, you know.
But Phil, what I think what Nori means is we're talking about the impression, the view of probably the English voter, aren't we, Nori? I mean, the point is,
that's so
they believe, I would say 95% of the English voters believe that Scotland is subsidised. And
I hear it.
And if you look at we talk about the Scotsman article about this problem with cross-border transport, like without going into the detail of that article. The idea that it's kind of goes up against what you've just said, Jimmy, about handing out more money to Scotland. I think there will be a plan to hand money to Scotland, but it'll bypass Holyrood.
Yeah, it'll be a plan to hand out money that should come to Holyrood.
Yeah, hence the reason in that article they're talking about talking to local councils, because they don't want to talk to the Scottish Government. The Scottish Government is far too capable of turning around to them and saying, no, sorry, we'll take the funding. We're the experts in transport in Scotland. We'll sort transport in Scotland. We don't need your input. Thank you very much. They want to talk to the second level because the first level's too capable for them.
Yeah, and I mean, as I said earlier, it'll be like broadband.
Mm.
The Westminster is responsible for broadband, and it was too slow, making a mess of it. So the Scottish Government puts money into it. The Tories immediately blame any fault with the rollout of broadband on the Scottish Government, who are not responsible for it. That is what will happen if they start interfering in transport.
Yeah, it's the same as it's what England do. It's what England's always done. Blame the locals for their own problems. At the end of the day, as an occupied country, which Scotland most certainly is, in my opinion, Scots are the only thing Scots are to blame for right now is no kicking their occupiers' arses straight out the country and taking back their own nation. But that's only a matter of time, in my opinion.
The other interesting thing in the article I noticed was the railway line to Carlisle.
Mm-hmm.
One of the major successes that the SNP had was the train from Edinburgh down to Gala.
Yeah, we were there on the first day, Phil, eh?
So that looks like the train from Gala down to Carlisle will look like a success.
Yeah, well,
I would fully expect that to be the first project.
So they are because the Scottish Government have already done all the surveying all the way down to Carlisle, mate, and it's ready. It's actually shovel ready. The Scottish Government have funding in place and have been asking the local authorities in the northwest to back them on this. So that's quite a bit of a takeover by whoever's in London has decided to take that project over. But the reality is that's a Scottish Government project that's ready to go.
And as I say, if it's a success, Westminster will expect the credit. And if there's glitches or it fails for some reason, the Scottish Government will get the blame.
Can you imagine how many Union Jacks will be planted along the side of the track?
Exactly. Phil, you wanted to come in.
Well, apart from that, Jimmy, anyway, when you were describing yourself as occupied, you're actually natives as far as they're concerned in Westminster. Why do you think they ripped up the railway tracks in the first place in the 50s and 60s? They wanted you to get too powerful if you've got good communication links and all that. And if the British or the English put it in Westminster, it will be solely for the use or for the benefit of Westminster. They've done it in all the colonies.
Well, do you know what worries me about the transport links between England, the south of England and Scotland? Things like, still don't understand why it's in our long-term interest for the Scottish Government to support an extra runway at Heathrow. We've been doing very well in recent years with direct links to the continent.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I didn't see any reason why. I'm assuming they were bought off in some way. I'm assuming there was some kind of consequentials promised or something. But I wouldn't support a third runway at Heathrow. And you're right. It's ludicrous, for example, that I can't go north from Edinburgh, jump on a train and go to Fort William. Ridiculous that I have to travel to Glasgow and change train in a country this size that we can't get about our own country. And that's specifically designed to keep us small and rural.
And do you think that an independent Scotland wouldn't already have subsidised ferries daily from Rosyth to the continent?
I think an independent Scotland, if Scotland had chosen independence at, say, the back end of the 70s, if they'd voted yes then, well, they did, but they didn't quite jump the hurdle that was placed in front of us by the Labour Party. But by now, I would imagine Scotland would probably have followed Finland's route, and most public transport would be free. I would expect us it would be acceptable to the entirety of the Scottish population that people that lived in the islands got subsidised accommodation to get home.
And also with
Sorry, accommodation, subsidised transport.
Transport. Interconnectors, electricity interconnectors. Why aren't there I mean, it was mooted 20 years ago. A North Sea interconnector, all the way, you know, Norway, Germany, Denmark, Scotland.
Why doesn't the oil come ashore? The oil pipeline come ashore in Scotland. We know why.
The oil does.
Doesn't.
Oh, you
Comes
mean
ashore in dead south. Comes ashore down in
it's gas.
Hull or somewhere. And the reason for that is so that we don't have any power over it.
You're right, Stewart. See, when you think of that, particularly electricity, but also gas for the North Sea, you know, the difference it could have made to mainland Europe had we put that infrastructure in. It would have made a massive difference when the Soviet Union broke up. You wouldn't have got the oligarchs being quite so powerful quite so quickly, because they wouldn't be making that kind of money out of Russian oil and gas if we were supplying them with electricity.
I mean, if you think that Iceland is wonderful, I mean, all geothermal heat from all that volcanic, or what, you know what I mean? It's massive amounts of almost virtually free electricity. Connect them to Norway, which is an enormous hydro electricity producer. Germany, where electricity generation is completely devolved all over. Even Berlin makes its own electricity. And then you've got Scotland, wind and tide and wave.
Yeah, Europe's energy market has made an awful lot of money for an awful lot of people, and it's possibly one of the most corrupt markets on the planet.
Well, Scotland's electricity has made an awful lot of money for European companies.
Yeah.
As have our trains.
You wouldn't be you're not very popular with the IMF and all the monetarists if you decide to hang on to your assets. That's why you've got Scotland. I mean, and the British government, Westminster, gets the coin coming in from all their pals in the States and everywhere else that are sucking the oil out. I mean, yeah,
the worry is, mate, if we don't stand up, they will do exactly that with Scottish Water as well, because Scottish Water's worth plenty. And it'll be sold to the London spivs who will hang on to it for about 12 months and then sell it on to Europeans, because at some point the Europeans would be the ones who actually had the common sense to invest in the infrastructure, whereas the spivs just want it for a quick buck.
Next thing is the water, because Scotland contains 80% of the fresh water in Britain, 80%. And they reckon that England will be dry by 2050. So
isn't there some mad statistic that Loch Ness contains all the water that England would need?
It contains as much fresh water in Loch Ness as there is in all the lakes in England.
Yeah,
that
one.
England and Wales, actually. I seen a stat the other week as well, where it's literally billions of pounds Severn Trent make out of Welsh water, and not a single penny of that has been reinvested back in Wales in the last 2 decades.
Well,
only last month, this is a sign of the future, only last month in America, the first futures market was set up in water.
Yeah.
You can now future-proof your supplies of water by trading in water.
Right, lads, I'm moving to somewhere where there's a burn.
Yeah, just check for any ground or any farming or anything. You get the fresh water.
Actually, I know exactly where I'll go. There's no cattle between me and the water.
Oh, right. You can get an Archimedes wheel, I think. An Archimedes screw and generate your own electricity as well.
Well, me and screwing have been, shall we say, not friends for a while.
I wondered where you were going with that one, Norman.
Stewart, what else caught your eye?
I think we need a good news story. What do you think?
Nah. Not unless it involves Tories dying.
Hang on, is there one? Is there a good news story? Where?
Yeah, well, I think so. It's very rarely we have a good news story, but we do have 1 or 2 champions around, and it's the time of year where we're going to hear about all these people like John Cruddas in a minute shortly, these nasty people getting honours from the down south. But Lesley Riddoch was champion of ours, and Lesley Riddoch was named Scottish Independence Campaigner of the Year this week. And the prize was £1,500, and on top of getting the prize for £1,500, she's donated that £1,500 to Edinburgh's Yes Hub. So that's
splendid.
What a great woman.
Yeah, I did notice somebody on social media this morning who labelled her as the future president of an independent Scotland. I thought, oh, didn't he curse her with that doll? Nicola's team will start taking her down the minute they hear something like that.
She's a smart woman, Lesley. She's actually Irish, but she's got strong connections in the north of Scotland, and has got many.
Is it her dad that's Irish and her mum's Scottish?
Can't remember, but she's got the Doric as well as the Ulster Scots.
Yeah, well, okay, all right. That's a bit of good news. We'll go with that.
Yeah, and what's his name? Got campaign organisation of the year, Business in Scotland. Gordon McIntyre Kemp.
That was a nice one because he has worked away quietly, chipping away at all the nonsense, producing some good information in understandable chunks. McIntyre Kemp has up until now been an unsung hero of this year when it comes to independence.
I have my issues with the fact that he chooses to make money out of it, but other than that, charge on, it's a well-deserved award.
He's a businessman. The Tories will love him.
But no, you know, I mean, I always say, you think of the creative world and how many people are creative, bands, painters, whatever, and 90% of them don't make any money out of it. Congratulations if you can. My brother managed to give up teaching maths in Hoyk, which he hated, because he could make a living out of his art. It's something that, I mean, just don't put businessmen down because they can further the project of independence and earn a crust.
Didn't you take me down the road of I only voted Tory because I made money out of it against Stewart?
I'm not going to mention that. It's you that's bringing it up.
Well, I'm not going to stop bringing it up. I'm afraid you're going to.
I took part in the bourgeois revolution.
I'll be on your headstone, mate. Once voted Tory.
Bringing that up about businessmen, right? You know, businessmen. Well, that's fine as long as they look after their staff, don't exploit their staff. And that led me to think, I wonder if Anasawa's employees or his dad's employees are still getting a national living wage. You know, business.
No, they're on the national minimum wage, mate, because Mr. Sarwar's profits aren't as healthy as he wishes them to be.
Okay.
But his dad has lost how many million?
Which brings us, talking about awards, etc., to, well, Nigel Starmer's. Jesus, I'm getting... Keir Starmer's honours list is out today.
Yeah.
And I suppose we have to mention the most splendid recipient of Boris's honours list, Mr. Cruddas.
Peter
Cruddas. Do you want he's a city tycoon, and he's been nominated, but the House of Lords appointment commissions aren't really interested. They don't want to support his nomination. Basically, he can away. Boris can override that. That will be the next story if he does. You know, I mean,
I thought he had.
He already has.
Yeah.
He's nominated. He's nominated him. He's nominated him. So it doesn't matter.
He's gone over.
The appointment.
The House of Lords committee looks at it, and then
the House of Lords committee looked at it before the nomination. Phil, the House of Lords committee looked at it before the nominations came out and advised him not to nominate Cruddas, and he's gone ahead and done it anyway. At that point, he becomes a Lord.
But I mean, really, just shows you what Boris is. I mean, he was resigned from his position as co-treasurer 2012, offering political access for cash. Undercover footage emerged from offering access to the Prime Minister and the Chancellor for up to £250,000 quid. The guy should be in jail, not getting nominated into the House of Lords, you know, and then he donated 50 grand to Johnson's leadership, 3.5 million to the Tory party and 1.5 to the Vote Leave.
That's a lot of money, mind you, to get. I mean, some people get into the House of Lords a lot cheaper than £5 million.
Yeah, you just have to tell lies and do U-turns.
Aye. As I said the other day, guys,
Baroness Ruth.
there are people hiding for the police in Sicily, in dark corners, who are reading the British press this morning and laughing at just how corrupt London is.
Oh, well, London's the most corrupt capital in the world, particularly the city anyway. There's no doubt about that. That's why we're leaving, so it can remain so.
So what about Keir Starmer's list?
Do you know what? The one that shocked me was the chief executive of the Board of Deputies of British Jews. I'm not shocked so much, but it's very insensitive timing considering it's going to drive another stake into the cleft, the wide gap between the two wings of the Labour Party, isn't it?
Well, apart from that, the Board of Deputies is a right-wing, Tory voting, Tory, proselytising, and I don't know, why would he want somebody to represent a right-wing 17th century cabal? You know what I mean? Yeah, they're virulently anti-Labour. So how the hell are we nominating?
I want to have a word about the crossbenchers, because I'm anti-establishment, as all of us are, I think, here, apart from Norrie, of course.
No, I'm not. No.
I thought you'd move from the Marxists to the establishment, like the
I'm seriously thinking of joining the Tory party, because you've obviously done well out of it.
All right. I was looking at the list of so-called crossbenchers, and this is just typical, I suppose, of what goes on down there. Sir Terence Etherton, PC. I assume that means Privy Councillor. So he's already on the inside. Head of there's Simon MacDonald, head of the Diplomatic Service. Andrew Parker, Director General of MI5. But the one that these are all, you expect all these to be going in.
Yeah, that's just civil service goals, isn't it?
They expect it. But the one that's got me is who's been nominated, the Right Reverend and Right Honourable Dr. John Sentamu, Archbishop of York. I thought the Archbishop of York was in the House of Lords anyway.
Is he not a retired Archbishop?
Does that mean he's got to leave the Lords?
I would presume so. You need to make room for the next Archbishop.
All right. Well, that explains things. I was just wondering why he had to be nominated. I thought he would have already been there.
I'm pretty sure he was nominated because of the colour of his skin, Stuart. As Lewis Hamilton being knighted, they have to brown up the list somewhat, and John Sentamu does that quite clearly.
His name's just clicked in with me. I remember him now.
Mm-hmm.
I see that our racing driver is already being criticised for using his newfound influence for BAME projects.
Is he? Is he bending the knee now? I think.
No. He's actually he's. I can't exactly remember.
I think that Formula One have been fairly okay on the Black Lives issue.
Not according to him. Not in a practical sense. There aren't enough BAME people involved in the sport.
All right.
Formula One's such a wonderful body to be honouring anyway, given that the Mosley family still hold a big massive share in it, the Eccleston family still hold a big massive share in it. They're just taking a back seat and letting other people run it because they are so politically incorrect that their name is anathema to sponsors.
Right, guys, who's not had a shot yet? Phil?
No, I was bringing up about the peerages and what's his name, and just the general cluster bleep of the Labour Party, both here and south of the border.
I would like to reference a very nice article by Joanna Cherry. I'm a bit of a fanboy there, I must admit. She doesn't say much and do much to upset me. And earlier in the week, when it came to the Brexit votes, I was for abstaining. I changed my mind on this show couple of days ago, and I'm glad I did. And she gave me more reason to, but it's after the event, so to speak. It's an article in the National. I recommend that people read it. She raises one or two things. She says next month SNP members will meet at National Assembly to consider a plan of action if Boris Johnson continues to refuse a Section 30 order. Now that's good, but it's bad because the Section 30 order should, in my opinion, shouldn't be asked for, and it should certainly not be asked for after the May election. The whole point, I mean, by the time we get there, we've heard this story before. We're going down another delay, and I'll be told to wheesht for Indy.
I've been. Sorry, Jimmy.
It'll be wheesht for Nikki. That's
Well,
what the campaign's going to be next year. Wheesht for Nikki. She's your leader. She knows best.
I've been thinking about this last couple of days. Now, one of my big memories of the Catalan situation was it was a kind of 50-50 between independence and democracy. There was quite a lot of people interviewed who were our equivalent of unionists in Spain when I was across. And a lot of them were saying basically, no, I support the drive for democracy. There should be a referendum, there should be a vote. Now I'm wondering if that's a tack that might work better to get upset about and drive for not an independence referendum, but the right to a democratic referendum.
Yeah,
so instead of UDI, unilateral declaration of independence, we go for UDD, unilateral declaration of democracy.
The only danger with that, mate, is that you get too many unionists involved in the campaign, and it gets hamstrung. It becomes an idiot campaign about federalism for England, and we all know that federalism will never, ever, ever happen.
At the end of the day, federalism or not, you're still only going to be 8% of the population.
Yeah, and I'd rather be 100% Scottish than 8% of Brit.
Yeah,
a nice way to put that, Jimmy.
So a no-go then?
I don't think it's a no-go, because I think you might be right. I think that might be where Nicola wants to take the movement for the next 5 years, so that she can stall as First Minister of Scotland and doesn't actually have to push towards independence. But I think we should be aware that that's exactly what it would be, as a stalling tactic. So
you guys are still UDI guys?
I'm not UDI.
You just don't want to call it that?
I think anything that brings about the restoration of Scotland's rightful position as an independent country is useful, and if it has to be UDI, it has to be UDI. I'm even tempted if they can come up with some sort of dominion thing, as long as it doesn't lead to a bloody civil war like it did in Ireland.
Some sort of dominion thing? Well,
that's as I said before, I don't know. Look,
you mean like Canada or Australia?
Canada, Australia, New Zealand. First of all, they went dominion, and effectively they had independence. In fact, they didn't get full independence, I think, Canada, until 1980 or something like that. You know, I mean,
well, that was like Ireland. That was 1949. Before, I mean, they did something in 1938 just so that they didn't allow the English or the Brits to use their ports during the war.
Yeah, as military bases. Yeah.
49, it was get to. We've got just get to.
I have no interest in a halfway house. If I wanted to go to the halfway house, I'd go to the pub up to.
Yeah, well, I don't want to go to a halfway house, Jimmy, either. But if that ends up, depending on if there's a way to get independence and there's no way of being clawed back from that halfway house, then I'd say okay.
Yeah, but if I would suggest to you that that's the kind of thing that would be used specifically to split the Yes movement. Because offering something like that might just get the politicians on side, but it's not going to get the people on side.
Yeah, I couldn't support Dominion status.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we left with then, Norrie? What's the plan?
I can't claim to have a plan, and I never have. I mean, I do think the point I'm making about going ahead with a vote, regardless of whether we have permission, is the next step. And I don't really care what they call it, how they dress it up. I think we do need to have a vote, whether that's a vote on renegotiating the Treaty of Union, whatever the hook it's hung on, it has to be a democratic vote, or there will be trouble.
I think I agree with you, Norrie. I totally agree that there's going to be a vote, but we are perhaps crediting the Conservative Party of Great Britain with being Democrat, and as far as I'm concerned, they're not.
I'm not.
They're about to gerrymander the system to guarantee Conservative victory over the next few elections. And the way that they get rid of the Fixed Term Parliament Act will tell us a lot about just how anti-democratic they are. Because Boris, if he chooses, could choose to get rid of that in such a way that he has an 8-year term as Prime Minister.
I don't disagree with you, and I think there is a real danger, and the Lords have already looked at this, may still be working on it, that they try to pass laws that make it impossible, democratically or otherwise, for Scotland to get its independence. So I think there's a time element on this one.
Yeah, it's not tonight. It's no the panic that you get the Fruit Loops on internet that'll be telling you that as of 11 o'clock tonight, when we're no longer part of the EU, the English will tread upon the throat of Scotland and we've no chance to save our nation. But there is a time pressure. I'll tell you what though, if they try to write a constitution that ties Scotland irrevocably into being part of England, I'll fill the taxi with weapons and I'll go down there and take half of them out myself.
Phil, you can go down with him because you know London.
Aye, Barry, Phil, you could be my wingman, pal.
I won't be coming.
I think the Tories, if the Tories are in for 5 years, and if there's any chance of them getting in again, Scottish Parliament's gone. I'd put money on it. Scottish Parliament would be gone, and the Welsh Parliament and all the rest of it by the end of this Tories. I mean, he's already started it. You've got the internal bill, which basically means it can come up here and override everything you want. So, I mean, sorry, when are you going to realise you're colonials? Get the vote out on May. And stop talking about a referendum, because you will put people off. What you should be doing is, over the last year, is the record of this government, because they'll always slag it off. Free education. There's free education up here, further education. You've got that. Nurses can still go and get their all the rest of it. There's whole loads of stuff up here that you can press. And in England, all that's done. I've done it when I've been in working men's clubs and that, and you go round. They should know better. But apparently all these knob ends down there, they're paying for all the stuff that we've got up here. Scotland doesn't pay for it.
It's also politically a trap. It's been there a long time now. It's like the Labour Party continually expecting votes because of the NHS.
Yeah.
It doesn't last forever. And
well, actually,
that is a problem. There is no big idea sitting on Nicola Sturgeon's desk that can pull people in. The only idea there is independence.
And she's not willing to press the lever on independence, I don't think.
Well, she needs to find a way to do it. It's not without Section 30. She's going to have to break some law, or she's going to be taken to court at the very least.
Yeah, well, I think the court case it could prove very interesting as Wales attacking the internal market bill. It's a bit embarrassing to Scots that it's taking the Welsh Labour Party to be that apoplectic about the internal market bill that they're taking it to court. We should be 100% behind that.
The good thing about the Welsh doing it, it's not going to be dismissed as grievance.
And you see the Welsh independence movement is growing as well. But do you really agree that she should ask for a Section 30 just so the foreigners can stand there in a way?
you should send him a letter every week, because every time he refuses it, some other guy who's sitting on the fence goes, wait a minute, this isn't democracy. I'm a yes supporter. Stewart, you haven't had a chance to.
Well, I'm just going to, we started this part of the discussion based on Joanna Cherry's article. I'll read out a couple of points. She says here, next month, SNP members will meet at the National Assembly, right? We've been here to continue to refuse a Section 30 order. What's going to happen? I have already suggested how the legal route might be further explored with a bill crafted by the Scottish Government. I'd like to know more about that. Others wish to see a plebiscite election considered, and I hope this will also be discussed. That's AUOB, etc. Many, including most recently Professor Curtis, have talked about the possibility of SNP MPs participating in parliamentary disruption. We've covered that recently. And she also says, I agree with Kenny McCaskill that we need to think about how our parliamentary tactics might change.
So that's two of them.
Have a read of the article. It's well crafted.
Seeing as it's New Year and we're kind of tight for time, Stewart, you wanted me to show Mike Russell's speech yesterday in Holyrood.
That's 10 minutes, mind you.
It's 10. Well, we'll just scrape it in if we go now, which I can do. So
a barnstormer of a speech by a great politician who we're going to miss. I hope he's going to stay working.
He's just been elected president of the SNP, mate.
Oh, cool.
What part of we're short of time did you guys not get?
Okay, on you go.
Okay. So thanks everybody for watching and listening. And we'll catch you tomorrow. Will we catch you tomorrow?
No, next year.
Next year.
Okay.
Tomorrow we'll see.
We'll have a day off tomorrow then, and we'll see you on the 2nd.
Okay.
Cheers for now.
And the first thing we lose is that intangible. And the first thing we lose is that intangible. It is the belief that peace and prosperity comes from the work of sovereign nations who freely pool part of their sovereignty.
Back to the beginning, folks, sorry.
And the first thing we lose is that intangible. It is the belief that peace and prosperity comes from the work of sovereign nations who freely pool part of their sovereignty in order to work together. That is what we will lose, or what the United Kingdom will lose, for no good reason, except prejudice fueled by tabloid newspapers, pandered to by the Conservatives. No, I don't want to take an intervention. Pandered to by the Conservatives and aided and abetted by the Conservative members in this chamber. And that is the shame they should feel. If this deal was really so good, why are the Conservatives so keen to blame all those who will not vote for it? Surely they would want to take this deal to themselves and claim all the credit for it. But the truth is that this deal is a very bad deal, and they have sought to hide it under the economic effects of COVID. And they want now to move on from it, to persuade us all to forget about it, to talk in some artificial language of unity, and to believe that we will simply accept what has taken place. Well, I won't accept it, because I won't give up on that intangible. And many people in Scotland will not accept it, because they will look at this set of circumstances and say a number of things. They will say, first of all, they have not been told the truth. They will say that the people who have persuaded them to follow this deal themselves did not believe in this deal. And they will say they have taken an opportunity, such an opportunity, from our young people. There's been lots of quoting, Presiding Officer, of people who spoke in this debate or that debate about this matter. Let me quote Miles Briggs, who spoke in the same debate that I spoke in on the 28th of June 2016, the first debate after the vote. He said, our young people take an international view. We need to make sure that they have the opportunity to study, work and travel that they had before.
That's it. That's it. 2-minute clip. Thanks for listening, folks, and we'll call it a day at that.